Hello and welcome to the Journal.ie newsroom. I'm Sinead O'Carroll, the news editor here at the Journal, and I'm joined by Judge Isabel Kennedy, the chair of the Referendum Commission, and we're going to talk through some questions that our readers have had about the vote on Friday on the 8th Amendment. So we'll kick off kind of very basic. What is the Referendum Commission that you are chair of?
Well, the Minister for Housing, Planning and Local Government, in advance of every referendum, may establish a referendum commission, and did so in this particular instance. And our role is prescribed by law, that is by statute, and we're a neutral, independent body, and we provide the facts in relation to the upcoming referendum. We encourage people to vote, and we explain what the referendum proposal is all about, and also, of course, make people aware that there is a referendum coming up, which we know is coming up this Friday.
Okay, so your job then it's quite short, is it? How long do you hold the job of chair of the Referendum Commission?
Well, once the referendum was called, we were then established as the Referendum Commission, and that was on the 9th of March.
Okay, so it's only a short job. It's not like you hold this job for the next referendum or the next one after that?
No, the Referendum Commission may be established for each referendum, and as I said, that was done so in this particular instance. And the Referendum Commission is made up of a number of commissioners. There's myself as chairperson of the Commission, there's the Ombudsman, there's the Comptroller and Auditor General, there's the Clerk of the Dáil, and there's the Clerk of the Seanad. And we make up the Referendum Commission, the neutral, independent body charged with giving information to people in relation to the referendum proposal.
Okay, just to kick off, and for people who are watching and maybe have questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments underneath, but we just wanted to kind of make clear what your remit isn't. So a lot of the kind of, I guess, controversies or big questions around this referendum have been things about claims on posters, postering, online ads, leaflets, misleading information. None of that is in with your remit, so we won't be asking you questions around those things. But you can tell us a lot about what we will be voting on and about. So what exactly are we being asked to vote on Friday?
Right. Well, you're absolutely right. Matters such as posters are outside of the remit of the Referendum Commission, because we're charged with providing the neutral, factual information to people in relation to the upcoming proposal. So what is the proposal? Well, the people are being asked whether or not they wish to change the Constitution and to remove Article 40.3.3 from the Constitution and to replace in its stead a provision which will state provision may be made by law for the regulation of termination of pregnancy. So that is what the referendum proposal is about.
Okay. So obviously we've heard a lot about the 8th Amendment in this campaign, but there'll be something called the 36th Amendment on the ballot paper when we go in. So can you explain to our viewers and readers, just so that there's no confusion, what that 36th Amendment is and what the 8th Amendment is?
Yes, well, this is the proposed 36th Amendment to the Constitution. The 8th Amendment is what is contained in Article 40.3.3, along with another two amendments, which are the 13th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution. All of that make up Article 40.3.3 of the Constitution. So the proposal, if I can just show people, in fact, it might be helpful, Sinead, our guide, which is the guide which was published by the Referendum Commission, and it is in English and also Oscueliga. And in that guide we show a sample ballot paper, and on that ballot paper people will see that it says, do you approve of the proposal to amend the Constitution contained in the undermentioned bill? And then the bill is mentioned as the 36th Amendment of the Constitution Bill 2018. And within that bill is the proposal to amend the Constitution, to remove Article 40.3.3 of the Constitution and to replace in its stead a new article which will read, in the event of a yes vote, that provision may be made by law for the regulation of termination of pregnancy. So I'll just show people again the sample ballot paper, and so people can see that there are two boxes, and if you approve of the proposed amendment, you mark X in that box. If you do not approve, you mark X in the no box. So I think hopefully that is quite clear, but people can examine our guide and look to see what the ballot paper, sample ballot paper, is actually like.
Great. A lot of the questions we have been receiving from readers are around what's currently allowed in Ireland and the law that currently regulates termination of pregnancy. Can you tell us a bit about what law we actually have in place right now?
All right. Well, at the moment, the Oireachtas can only pass laws allowing for termination of pregnancy where there is a real and substantial risk to the life of the woman, including a risk of suicide. Now, that law comes about as a result of the Supreme Court's interpretation of the X case, which was in 1992, where the Supreme Court found that to be the position. Subsequently, then in 2013, the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Act was passed, and that implements the decision of the Supreme Court. So, in Ireland at the moment, termination is lawful only where there is a real and substantial risk to the life of the woman, including a risk of suicide. That is the current legal position.
So is a woman who does procure an abortion, say, through using abortion pills, is that a criminal act in Ireland right now?
Well, you've heard me mention there the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Act of 2013, and within that Act there is a provision, which is Section 22 of that Act, and that says that it is the intentional destruction of unborn human life is a criminal offence. So that is the offence contained within the 2013 Act. That particular offence carries a maximum penalty of 14 years imprisonment or a fine or both. The duration of the prison sentence must not exceed 14 years. Of course, a lesser sentence may be imposed by the court, but that is a criminal offence currently on our statute books.
Okay. And if the 8th is not, if the Article 43.3 is not repealed in the event of this referendum, could the government decriminalise that act?
Well, in relation to that, Article 43.3 in brief acknowledges the right to life of the unborn. So in order to vindicate and to defend that right, one of the ways of doing that is by way of a criminal sanction. And it is the duty of the state to vindicate and to defend a constitutional right. So we, the Referendum Commission, think it is unlikely that it would be removed from the statute books. And that is because of the content of Article 43.3.
So we're just going to move on slightly because a few viewers at the moment are leaving comments on Facebook and asking about the ins and outs of actual voting day. So they're actually wondering, do they need their polling card? Is that something that they have to bring with them on Friday?
Well, those persons who are eligible to vote in a referendum and who are on the register of electors are entitled to vote. So if you have your polling card, you bring that, and you also bring valid photo ID with you to the polling station and cast your vote. If you haven't received a polling card and you are eligible to vote and you are on the register of electors, then in those circumstances, go to the polling station, but bring photographic identification with you.
And one of our other readers was in a position that they have a flight booked at 5:55 a.m. on Friday, and they were wondering, is there any way that they can vote before the 7 a.m. opening?
Well, clearly that listener would like to vote, but the polling stations open at 7 a.m. and they close at 10 p.m. So you must, if you wish to cast your vote, you must do so within that time frame.
And just to go back to the ins and outs of what will happen in the event of a yes vote, what happens then in terms of our constitution and our laws?
Well, I've already explained the current legal position. So in the event of a yes vote, Article 43.3 will be removed from the Constitution, and in its stead will be placed a provision which will state provision may be made by law for the regulation of termination of pregnancy. And that will mean that the Oireachtas may pass laws in circumstances other than those which currently are permitted. That is where there is a real and substantial risk to the life of the woman, including a risk of suicide. So that is the effect of a yes vote.
And can that legislation change over the years, or is that only the legislation that we have seen now, the draft legislation, or can it be different legislation again?
Well, if the majority votes yes, it will then enable the Oireachtas to pass laws. What those laws will be a matter entirely within the remit of the Oireachtas. So it is for the Oireachtas to pass laws.
And in terms of a no vote, what happens?
In terms of the no vote, then the position remains the same. That is, Article 43.3 remains within the Constitution. The 2013 Act remains in situ. And then in those circumstances, laws may only be passed in circumstances where there is a real and substantial risk to the life of the woman, including a risk of suicide.
Can another referendum be held if a government deemed it necessary?
Well, that is really a matter for the Oireachtas.
One of the questions we've had from a few people actually is, in the event that they don't vote, what happens?
Well, in the event that an individual doesn't vote, well then that vote will not be counted, because if you want your voice to be heard, you must vote.
I've just seen a question come in from a commenter here. When do postal votes need to be sent in by? But I think they may have missed the...
Unfortunately, that time has now passed, because the date of application for a postal vote, the final date was the 28th of April.
So sorry about that. You're definitely too far gone to get your vote in. Is there anything else that a first-time voter needs to be aware of? We've talked about polling cards and bringing your ID. Is there anything else that if you are going into a ballot box for the first time, you need to know how to do it properly?
Well, I think the best thing to do in relation to that, we have a website, the Referendum Commission, which is RefCom 2018. And on that website, we have a video showing you exactly what to do when you go to the polling station to exercise your constitutional right to vote. So I think that might be the easiest thing for somebody who's a first-time voter to do, to go and look at that, and it talks you through step by step as to how you exercise your right to vote.
We obviously hear a huge amount of debates, and there's debates being on TV and radio every day really for the last few weeks, but we know in the media that a moratorium comes into place on Thursday, so the practice is that you won't hear anything from the yes or the no campaign for a few hours before you go vote. Does that impact the Referendum Commission?
No, the Referendum Commission is not subject to any moratorium, so we can continue right up and during the actual casting of votes.
And how do you encourage people to vote? Because obviously that's part of your remit, to try and get as many people out. And how are you doing that?
Yes, well, we have had an information campaign which has been ongoing now for some considerable period of time. And really the focus of the campaign at this point in time is not only just information and not only just encouraging people to vote, but also explaining to people as to, how they vote. And I've just explained that as to the content of our website in relation to that. So I just urge people to look at our website and to read our guide and to have themselves fully informed. Also, we have a broad advertising campaign, not only online but also on print media and every other form of media. So I think people should be able to see that there is a very public campaign in relation to information and, of course, encouraging people to vote.
I've seen that you've taken over the @Ireland Twitter account and you're curating that. Is that somewhere that people can also get their questions answered, or are you being very specific about what you're doing with that account this week?
Well, in relation to that, you're absolutely correct. We've taken that over for this week, so people can ask questions and then we will do our best to answer those questions.
Okay. In terms of then when a vote comes in, can a challenge to that vote or can a challenge to that result, so on Saturday when we get the result in, and does that have anything to do with your remit or the Referendum Commission?
No, but I can explain briefly what happens is that the returning officer, once the votes are counted, will issue a provisional certificate and must publish that in an Irish Fagul. Then if there are no challenges or if there are unsuccessful challenges, that provisional certificate becomes final. And if the referendum is passed, then it will be signed into law by the President, and if it's not passed, well, then the position remains the same.
So does that mean it's an automatic process that if there is a yes vote on Friday and we get the result on Saturday, it's an automatic process that it will go into law and the Constitution changes?
Well, the provisional certificate, as I said, will issue by the returning officer, and then if there are challenges and if those challenges are unsuccessful or if there are no challenges, then that certificate becomes final.
Just have a look here and see if there's any further questions. Another question's come in there on Facebook about the constitutional protection to the unborn. If there is a yes vote on Friday, is there any constitutional protection for the unborn anymore?
Well, the Supreme Court have recently decided that the only constitutional protection or the only constitutional right of the unborn is that as contained in Article 43 of the Constitution. So in the event of a yes vote, as I said, the Constitution will be amended. Article 43.3 will be removed from the Constitution. A new provision will be placed in its stead, which, it's worth repeating, will say provision may be made by law for the regulation of termination of pregnancy. So in those circumstances then it will be for the Oireachtas to pass laws in relation to the regulation of termination of pregnancy.
And in a similar vein, and we've had this today but also in previous questions, whether it's still a criminal offence to intentionally destroy the unborn, as you mentioned, that's in the Protection of Life Bill, would that still be the case in terms of a no vote or in terms of a yes vote?
Well, At the moment, under the 2013 Act, as I said, it is an offence to intentionally destroy unborn human life. That is a criminal offence, and I've explained the position as regards that. In the event of a no vote, Article 43.3 remains in the Constitution. The 2013 Act remains unless it were to be there were to be amended or repealed. And in the event of a yes vote, in fact, in the immediate aftermath of a yes vote, the 2013 Act would remain in situ unless and until that is changed or repealed by the Oireachtas.
I think that is everything that we've had from our readers come in. So let me do one last check. Yeah, and I think probably just one last thing about you are obviously... Oh, we had one other question about the Irish language form. So I think you were going to just show that we had... If you are voting Os Gaeilge, there will be a section of the ballot paper which will show...
Yes, that's correct, Sinead. Sorry, Sinead. Yes, that is correct. As I've just shown people there a little while ago, our guide is in English and it is also in Irish. And in the Irish section, it will also show, in fact, in both sections, the ballot paper, which is in English and in Irish.
And just if you want, we're going to wrap up now, but if you want to give a final word about why people should go out and vote on Friday.
Well, the Constitution is our document. It's the fundamental law of the state. It can only be changed, that is amended, by a vote of the people. So it is our Constitution, and if people do not vote, other people will make the decision. So it is really important that people vote, and we, the Referendum Commission, urge people to exercise their constitutional right.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having us. We are continuing to answer your questions on thejournal.ie. If you have any further concerns or queries about your vote on Friday, send them to us at referendum@thejournal.ie. We've also got some voting guides online if you want to check those out. And our Q&A and our fact checks are already up online, and you'll find them on our app and desktop website. And continue to comment and send us an email if you have any concerns. And thank you very much.